North Korea started sending soldiers to Russia in late 2024. Less than a year has passed, and the Asian nation has already suffered serious casualties, with an estimated 6,000 of its troops either killed or wounded. Despite those heavy losses, North Korea's supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, has pledged to send 6,000 more of his countrymen right into the bloodbath of the Kursk Oblast, supposedly to help Russia rebuild the area, which has been the site of much conflict in the last 12 months. It's an extraordinary decision in many ways, but also shows just how committed Kim is to strengthening ties with Russia. Indeed, ever since the war broke out, North Korea has been one of a small number of nations to side with Russia. In 2022, it notably was just the third country, after Russia and Syria, to recognize the Russia-backed People's Republics of Luhansk and Donetsk, both situated in the Donbass region of Ukraine. In the wake of this, Ukraine immediately issued a strongly worded statement and severed all of its diplomatic ties with North Korea, stating, "The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine strongly condemns the decision of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to recognize the so-called independence of the territories temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions of Ukraine." In response to such an unfriendly act, Ukraine announces the severance of diplomatic relations with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Political and economic contacts with the DPRK had been suspended due to the international sanctions imposed on this country. Since then, North Korea has continued to support Russia over the course of its invasion, even as countless other countries around the world shunned and sanctioned the Putin regime. Supreme Leader Kim also contributed artillery, missiles, and ammunition to the Russian military, which Russian troops used to target Ukraine. But the situation dramatically escalated in October 2024, when multiple reports emerged that North Korean soldiers had been deployed to Russia and were undergoing intensive training in the country's eastern regions. That same month, Ukraine's military intelligence agency, HUR, claimed that North Korean troops had arrived in the Kursk Oblast, and reports from the US Department of Defense later estimated that around 10,000 North Koreans had entered the area by the end of the month. Since then, various sources and agencies have reported that anywhere from 11,000 to 14,000 North Koreans have been sent to fight alongside the Russians. And, if recent reports are accurate, around half of those soldiers have either been killed or wounded so far. This news comes from a highly trusted and reliable source, the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence, which shared a defence intelligence update on X on June 15. The update states, "Democratic People's Republic of Korea (DPRK) forces have highly likely sustained more than 6,000 casualties in offensive combat operations against Ukrainian forces in the Russian Oblast of Kursk. The total casualties amount to more than half of the approximately 11,000 DPRK troops initially deployed to the Kursk region." Open source reports suggest DPRK has subsequently deployed limited numbers of additional troops to Kursk. Significant DPRK casualty rates have almost certainly been sustained primarily through large, highly attritional dismounted assaults. On the one hand, this is a shocking statistic and an extraordinary loss of life for North Korea. On the other hand, it won't come as a surprise to those who have followed the war closely. After all, Russia has also lost a huge number of its soldiers in the few years since the war began. In another of its defense intelligence updates, published on June 12, the UK MOD revealed that the country had passed the grisly milestone of 1 million casualties. The Russian armed forces have likely sustained approximately 1 million casualties, killed and wounded, since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Of these, it's likely around 250,000 Russian soldiers are killed or missing, presumed dead, Russia's largest losses in an active conflict since the Second World War. The Post went on to reveal that Russia has likely sustained over 200,000 casualties in 2025 so far, with Ukrainian General Staff reporting a daily average of over 1,250 Russian casualties. Russia has lost all of those lives despite having a very powerful military force and soldiers who are fully familiar with the type of terrain and conditions they have encountered in Ukraine. The North Korean troops, meanwhile, come from a completely different part of the world and were simply thrown into this war with minimal training and preparation. Many military analysts and experts from around the world understandably and accurately predicted that the country would suffer heavy losses. In October of last year, for example, the National Defense Minister of South Korea, Kim Yang-hyun, called the North Korean troops cannon fodder for the Russians. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, echoed the cannon fodder claims later in 2024, and Colonel Ant Kiviselk, commander of Estonia's Defense Intelligence Center, also expressed doubts about the North Korean troops' capacities. Kiviselk said that North Korean soldiers are usually trained to fight in mountainous terrain, with around 80% of North Korean territory comprising of mountains and hills. Because of that, he said, they're unfamiliar with Ukraine's geography and climate, which could make combat operations more difficult. Kiviselk added, and their training does not include combat operations in such conditions. The training they receive in the Russian Federation is certainly not of a very high level. Therefore, we can expect North Korean units to suffer heavy losses in Ukraine, and likely even more losses than Russian forces have suffered so far. He was right. Perhaps Kim was hoping his highly trained troops would storm into Ukraine and help the Russians secure victory in the war. Instead, he's now preparing memorial services and monuments in memory of those who died. Russia's former defense minister and the current secretary of Moscow's Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, recently returned from a trip to North Korea and revealed the memorial plans to Russian state media. He explained that both Moscow and Pyongyang have plans to honor the fallen soldiers. The heads of our states have decided to perpetuate the feat of the soldiers of the Korean People's Army who took part in the military operations. Specifically, we're talking about opening memorials in Russia and the DPRK in memory of the Korean soldiers who died in the battles for the liberation of Russian territory. In this regard, the creation of a corresponding memorial complex with a museum in Pyongyang with the participation of the Russian side was discussed during the visit. In the wake of such serious loss of life, some countries' leaders would likely think twice about sending more men to their doom. However, it seems that Supreme Leader Kim has no qualms about throwing away more North Korean lives, as Shoigu also revealed that Pyongyang has pledged to send 6,000 more of its people to one of the most dangerous areas of Russia, the Kursk Oblast. To be more precise, Pyongyang has reportedly agreed to deploy 5,000 construction workers to help rebuild damaged areas of the oblast, along with 1,000 sappers or combat engineers who are specially trained to deal with explosives, obstacles, and fortifications. Shoigu explained the roles these men will take on. The chairman of State of Affairs of the DPRK, Kim Jong-un, has made a decision to send 1,000 sappers to Russia to clear mines from Russian territory, as well as 5,000 military construction workers to restore infrastructure facilities destroyed by the occupiers. Shoigu didn't reveal any timeline or schedule for when the workers and engineers will arrive, but it's likely that Russia will want to put them to work in Kursk as soon as possible. Ukraine launched an incursion into the oblast in August of last year, rapidly taking control of dozens of Russian settlements just beyond the border. It was a successful offensive, particularly in the early stages. In fact, only a couple of weeks into the incursion, Ukraine claimed it had taken around 90 settlements and close to 500 square miles of Russian territory, while also capturing hundreds of Russian soldiers in the process. And in September 2024, Zelensky vowed that Ukraine's armed forces would do all they could to hold on to the captured land as part of a long-term strategy to bring the war to an end and force Russia's President Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. Unfortunately, Ukraine was not able to maintain its grasp. By November of 2024, it had lost around 40% of the territory, and by March of this year, Russia had retaken almost all of the lost land, including the town of Sudza, which was the largest settlement the Ukrainians managed to capture. But Ukraine still made the most of the time it had in Kursk. Multiple news reports have revealed that Ukrainian soldiers planted anti-tank and anti-personnel mines across the region, as well as destroying key pieces of military infrastructure like command posts and storage facilities. Ukraine's forces also continued to bombard targets across Kursk, making the area extremely unsafe for troops in the area, be they Russian or North Korean. In early April, for instance, the Ukrainian Air Force targeted Russian military depots in Kursk, destroying large amounts of equipment and reportedly killing several dozen Russian soldiers too. And over the last couple of weeks, Ukraine has launched multiple strikes on targets near the Russian town of Tyotkino, with forces closing in and possibly days away from capturing the town in its entirety. All of this means that even if the next wave of North Koreans aren't going to be actively deployed on the front lines or used as cannon fodder like those who came before, they're still at huge risk of injury or even death. The sappers, despite their training, could easily fall victim to the many mines hidden by Ukrainian soldiers across the landscape, while construction workers might end up in the firing lines of future Ukrainian drone or missile strikes in the region. So why would North Korea want to willingly send so many of its people into such a bloodbath, especially after suffering such heavy losses already? The simple and obvious answer is money. As Soo Kim, a North Korea researcher and former CIA analyst, explains, sending North Koreans to support Russia is a quick and reliable way for Kim Jong-un to make money. So in the short run, Kim gets money in exchange for providing manpower to Russia. Long run, the access to critical military know-how will only strengthen his threat base. These claims are backed by numerous reports, revealing that Pyongyang has enjoyed serious economic support and large cash payouts from Russia since it started sending ammo, military equipment and troops to the country. Indeed, the former South Korean ambassador to Russia, Wi Sang-yak, argued that North Korea helping Russia is not a bad deal at all for Pyongyang, with the country enjoying numerous privileges and benefits as a result. South Korea's leading intelligence agency, the National Intelligence Service (NIS), reported that each North Korean soldier sent to Russia was given a monthly wage of around $2,000. North Korean workers, meanwhile, are said to receive around $800 per month. All that adds up to hundreds of millions of dollars in prospective revenue for North Korea. And many experts believe that a large part, if not all of that cash, is going straight to Kim's pocket. Bruce W. Bennett, a defense researcher and North Korea specialist, said, "I suspect that money coming from Russia is going directly to the party and then onto the Kim family." He added that perhaps only a small amount or even nothing would be paid out to the soldiers themselves. Hyun Sung, a former North Korean soldier who defected in the early 2000s, echoed this assessment, saying, "They won't be compensated," when asked if any of the funds would make it to the troops themselves. So, by sending his men to their deaths, North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, can continue to enjoy a life of luxury and opulence, while also solving several key crises that have impacted his country in recent times, namely a shortage of food and a weak economy. As we explained, the 4 million tons of grains that North Korea says it produces per year are actually about 1 million tons short of what it needs to feed the country. If Russia is offering 600,000 to 700,000 tons of rice, that's enough to cover more than half of what North Korea would need to meet the year's demand. He added, by sending a few containers worth of artillery shells, Pyongyang can afford a lot more than hundreds of thousands of tons of rice. In other words, with many countries around the world shunning and sanctioning North Korea, it's turned to one of the few allies it can find, Russia, to strike deals that solve its problems. Reports from South Korea's NIS also says that Russia is sharing advanced space technology with North Korea, aiding Pyongyang in launching high-end hardware like military reconnaissance satellites. But perhaps the biggest and best benefit for Kim and North Korea is that Russia may now choose to support and fight alongside the country, should it choose to invade or initiate a direct conflict with its neighbor, South Korea. As Wee puts it, North Korea is on record as having fought for Russia. If there ever is a war on the Korean peninsula, North Korea can now expect Russia to come and help. Even with the Russian military being gradually depleted over the course of the Ukraine war, it would still represent a massive ally for North Korea and a formidable force for South Korea and its allies to have to deal with should a Korean peninsula conflict ever break out. And the backing of Russia might be exactly what Kim has wanted and needed to pursue that kind of conflict. It's also one of the main reasons why South Korea and other nations around Asia, including Japan, have expressed shock and fear at the news of continued North Korean support on the ground in Russia. Japan's Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba, expressed deep concern over the announcement, fearing that continued cooperation between Russia and North Korea could jeopardize global security both now and into the future. The Foreign Ministry of South Korea also expressed grave concern, stating, "Our government has been closely monitoring developments related to the cooperation between Russia and North Korea in cooperation with international partners." Seoul has also stated that North Korea's actions are a direct violation of UN sanctions, and fears are reportedly rising in South Korea that the more help Russia gets from North Korea, the more likely it will be to intervene and assist the DPRK in any potential future conflict on the Korean peninsula. On top of that, experts are also worried that North Korean troops are gaining important and valuable combat experience and training from the Russia-Ukraine war, which could help them in a potential war with the South. For now, however, the focus is clearly on Kursk, and it appears that North Korea is 100% committed to the Russian cause, with no signs of backing out or shying away from further support. And it's worth noting that, despite being called cannon fodder in the past, and in spite of the heavy casualties they've incurred, North Korean troops and workers have proven highly effective and helpful aids to the Russian war effort so far. On the ground, many Ukrainian soldiers have been astonished by the resilience, motivation, and extraordinary discipline of the North Korean troops. Lieutenant Colonel Yaroslav Chaporny, a spokesman for the armed forces of Ukraine, said, "They're young, motivated, physically fit, brave, and good at using small arms. They're also disciplined. They have everything you need for a good infantryman." Chaporny also revealed that the North Korean soldiers were more than willing to end their own lives to evade capture. They've been blowing themselves up when they see capture is in sight. Yuri Bondar, a Ukrainian soldier with the 80th Separate Airborne Assault Brigade, confirmed these claims in a Facebook post. The enemy does not surrender. They eliminate themselves according to the same scheme: a grenade near the head and go. Those who remain on the battlefield are doused with flammable liquid and burned. Bondar was also impressed with the North Koreans' tactical awareness and capability with small arms, noting, "They demonstrate psychological resilience. Imagine, one runs and attracts attention, and the other from an ambush shoots down a drone with aim fire." On the Russian side too, various sources have expressed admiration towards the North Korean troops, with President Putin himself stating that they played a key role in regaining control of the Kursk Oblast. Putin said, "The Russian people will never forget the feat of the Korean Special Forces. We will always honor the Korean heroes who have gave their lives for Russia, for our common freedom, on an equal basis with their Russian brothers in arms." So, while North Korea pales in comparison to the kind of allies that Ukraine can call on, like the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and many others, it's still a helpful partner for Russia, with people who are extremely dedicated to helping the Kremlin achieve its aims, even to the point of sacrificing their own lives for the cause. In short, the 6,000 additional Koreans heading to Russia should not be underestimated. Many will be at risk of death or serious injury during their time on Russian soil, but in the meantime, they'll provide valuable support for Russian forces, make life harder for Ukrainian forces in the area, and leave many world leaders pondering how deep and dangerous this ever-deepening Russia-North Korean relationship could become. Now, to learn more, watch our recent video about how Ukraine is cleverly trapping Russian troops in Tyotkino, or check out our deep dive guide into a hypothetical war between North Korea and South Korea. And be sure to subscribe to our trusted news channel for day-to-day updates from the Russia-Ukraine war and other conflicts around the world.